out. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he's a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well. So the inherent handicaps are given there. Why teaching is difficult. Verse 2 is we all stumble in many ways. Of course, a teacher has to write, or a teacher has to speak. Most of the teaching was done speaking in this day. Today we can write things and type things, put things on paper, and different means of media, of getting things out. But in James' day, it was primarily speaking. So he says there we stumble in many ways, and because of what we say, we're not perfect. And because of this tendency in us, because of this flaw in us, the inherent handicap is we're not pregnant. We're not perfect. We're certainly not pregnant. We're not perfect, and therefore, because we're not perfect, we're going to say things. So why would you want to become a teacher? You're not perfect. You're going to say things that you're going to have to answer for because people are going to believe you. So therefore, go back to the command, let there be few of these teachers. So moving on, James is going to give an illustration of destruction. He's going to piggyback on verse 2, so to speak, and he's going to illustrate destruction. There's going to be the illustration of a little bridle and a big mouth, the illustration of a little rudder on a large ship, and the illustration of a small flame igniting a large forest. So what he's doing is he is piggybacking on this, what he has just said in verse 2. If anyone is able to bridle his whole body, his tongue, he's able to bridle the whole body as well. We all stumble in many ways. We say things that we wish we would not have said. And so he's going to piggyback on that and show that the power and the destructive nature that the tongue potentially has. A good teacher knows people learn in different ways, and so James offers these illustrations here, common examples from daily life as a legal witness to the need for proper control. The horse and the bridle, verse 3, the ship and the rudder, verse 4. And the genius of the illustrations is that he proves that a great part of true perfection is in the tongue, and that it exercises dominion, as he has just said, over the whole life. He said that in verse 2, over the whole body. So here are a series of illustrations to reinforce his belief that a comparatively small member, such as the tongue, has influence out of all proportion to its size. So, piggybacking, again, he's still addressing teachers. You need to be careful in what you say. We're going to stumble in what we say because we're not perfect. But I want you to realize that your words have an impact on people. And you need to be very careful about what you say. This little member in your body has the potential of doing great destruction, has the potential of doing great benefit, becoming a great blessing as well. And we can reasonably presume that James wrote what he did because his readers had been speaking irresponsibly. Some of his people wanted to become teachers. They were looking up to other people, and that they perhaps were speaking irresponsibly. So the function of the discourse markers, these markers, the discourse markers that you see in verse 3, now, verse 4, look, you see those? They call attention to the three examples that he gives here. Examples from natural life, the horse and the bridle, the ship and the rudder, and the fire and the forest. And also, effectively, what they do is they combine to make a powerful rhetorical argument for the unexpected power of the tongue relative to its size, both for good and for evil. So the emphasis throughout the passage is the influence of the small on the large. And so he begins. And we can read verses 3, 4, and 5. Now, if we put the bits into the horses' mouths so that they will obey us, we direct their entire body as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are so great and are driven by strong winds, are still directed by a very small rudder wherever the inclination of the pilot desires. So also the tongue is a small part of the body, yet it boasts of great things. See how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire. So verse 3 is the illustration of the horse and the bit, and how the bit controls such a large animal. Horses were, of course, well known in the day. We're looking at anywhere from 1,300 to 2,500 pounds for a horse, depending on the breed, of course. Where James is at, in these areas, it's more desert-like, so you're looking at smaller, lighter horses, not the cold winter kind of draft horses that are much heavier. Nevertheless, they're very strong animals. If you've ever been kicked by one, then you know that they can kick very, very quickly, and I mean really quickly. They can wallop you. I've seen a few dogs get it on the side of the head before they were able to get out of the way. They're very strong. Everybody in this day knows that, and so one of the reasons why James pulls this illustration out is because it's so well known, and there's such a vast contrast to the small member of the tongue, the small member called the tongue, and the large body. And so he's going to illustrate that using the bit. Obviously, it's not a hackamore bit. A hackamore bridle is one that doesn't have a bit. So they had a bit here. You put this bit in this big horse's mouth, and you're able to direct that big, large, powerful animal. The horses here stands emphatically forward. If you were to read the Greek, you would see, the first thing you would see in the Greek is now, and then the next word you would see is horses. So that's what I mean by it stands forward. It's near the beginning of the sentence, and as such, it emphatically stands forward, and it lends more prominence to the comparison. What he's trying to do is accent the comparison, this small bit, this great big horse. He's trying to present that, and he's trying to milk it, so to speak, for everything it's worth. That's what he's trying to do. So the effect is something like, look, in regard to horses, we put the bits in their mouths and it controls them. So, or another way to think of it, in other words, the principle in view works with horses. How much more would it work with humans? That's the effect. So the horses stands emphatically forward in the sentence to lend more prominence to the comparison, that of the controlling the mouth of a horse and of a man. That's where he's going. And he says that we put bits into the horses' mouths so that they will obey us, or in order that they may obey us, in order that they may be persuaded by us. That's the purpose of the bit, is to take control of this horse. The obedience of the entire horse in the parallel, not the parallel, but piggybacking on the statement in verse 4, if a man is able to if he's able to control his tongue, he's able to bridle the whole body as well. Think about it. In regard to horses, we put a bridle in and we control the whole body. So if a man is able to control his tongue, he's able to control his whole body. We've got a few comments to say about that towards the end. And of course, the purpose is so that they will obey us, the obedience of the entire horse. James is not satisfied to camp on a tamed tongue, but properly controlled tongue. That's what he's aiming after. He wants a tongue, and he's looking for a tongue. He's advocating for a language, a tongue that is controlled, not just tamed. And so in verse 4, he goes and he looks at something that's even bigger in this comparison. He says, look, and it's a call to closer consideration and contemplation. So from now, if we put the bits in the horse's mouth to verse 4, look, come closer here, come closer in your thinking and contemplate this. Remember, consider this. The ships, so great and are driven by strong winds, are still directed by a very small rudder wherever the inclination of the pilot desires. So the smallness of the member of the tongue comes into consideration at this point. The contrast is really heightened at this point. The smallness of the rudder, in contrast to the great size of the ship, draws attention to the importance of the tongue to the body, which is vastly out of proportion for its size. Just a few ounces. The tongue only weighs just a few ounces. And it can get us in a great deal of trouble. Now, some people have thought that James is calling attention to the size of the wind that the large ships require in order to sail. But I think it's better to see James calling attention to the strong, violent winds tossing the ship. And even so, this ship is controlled by this very small rudder. And in verse 5, he develops his case one step further. Verse 5 in some of your Bibles might be divided, but I believe all of verse 5 should be considered, not see how great a forest as being part of verse 6. I think all of verse 5 should be included. First of all, what James does is he notes this little member that it boasts continually, and there's a present tense there that's used. It boasts continually of great things. It's small, and yet it boasts, present tense, of great things. Mega is the word there, great things, big things. The tongue is powerful and vainly boasts of its might. And it's a reminder of Psalm 73 and verse 9. Psalm 73 and verse 9 reads like this. Psalm 73:9 says, "They have set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue parades through the earth." Pretty picturesque there. They have set their mouth against the heavens. They curse heavens. There's no truth on their lips, so to speak. Their mouth does not speak truth, and their tongue parades through the earth. They speak of boldness, there is pride, there is arrogance on their tongue, coming from their language there, in their language. So it's a powerful, and it boasts of its great might, and it's arrogant, and it's prideful. And secondly, James introduces a most striking imagery. He calls the tongue a fire. It is a fire, guilty of verbal arson in an instant. The tongue is. And, oh, that is so true. You know it and I know it. It is so true how we can bless someone, pronounce a blessing, and then turn right around and pronounce a curse on someone else when they're both brothers, when the tongue has no authority to make those decisions. And the picture is the contrast in which they're doing. They bless in one breath, and then the next breath they curse. That's what the tongue does. That's what it's portrayed as. It's portrayed as being a fire, guilty of arson. The New King James states it this way: "See how great a forest a little fire kindles." The tongue is deceptively small, but overwhelmingly dangerous. It's a little spark that has the capability of setting afire a whole forest. And gossip is one of those things that is extremely destructive in a church. If you've ever been a part of called up into gossip or a part of gossip going on, you know that there's nothing good that comes from it. People's attitudes and people's perspectives are influenced and changed many times for the wrong, and once they go so far down the road, there's no turning back. They're just going to adopt that attitude, and they're not willing to change that. And so there is a measure of permanence, so to speak, on that. How many people have you talked to in life where they say, "I don't go to church because they had a bad experience"? Somebody said something they should not have said. Somebody gossiped, somebody spread rumors, somebody did something they should not have said, and it was not handled well. Somebody got hurt, and and they decided not to go to church anymore or find another church or something. Gossip is so bad. In fact, Proverbs 6, you remember the 7 things that the Lord hates? If my memory serves me right, Proverbs 6, verse 16, there are 6 things which the Lord hates, yes, 7 which are an abomination to him: proud eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that runs rapidly to evil, a false witness who utters lies, and one who spreads strife among brothers. Among those lists there are 3 of them. There's a lying tongue, someone who utters lies, and spreads strife. Of the 6 things that the Lord hates, 3 of them have to do with speech. So it is historically and recorded, of course, in Scripture that the tongue is a fire, and it can set a whole forest aflame, as he's going to tell us here. But it is deceptively small, overwhelmingly dangerous is this little spark. The word forest here in James 3, it translates a Greek word that means wood. It's not really a forest here. James is probably referring not so much to a forest, which in Near Eastern